Good afternoon. I hope everybody's out there. My name's Chris Lyons. I'm Director of Communications for Public Health Wales. You can find me on Twitter, Facebook and LinkedIn, but for today, for the next hour, I'm going to be the chair of this seminar online. The title is When Senior Leaders Engage Online, and my thanks go to the 1,000 Lives Plus programme in NHS Wales, which has made all the arrangements and organised today. We've got colleagues around the UK listening in now. We've also got some from overseas in Canada and the US. And judging by the screen, there are 90 people who are dialed in. And I know behind those 90 lines there are a number of groups who are listening in collectively. So welcome to you all. The focus of this seminar, I think, is probably the first of its kind, or certainly one of the first. There is an absolute plethora of seminars and training on the use of social media, on marketing benefits, on managing its risks. But this is the first one that I've seen which focuses specifically on its engagement value for senior leaders. We have three contributors who each bring a special expertise and perspective to this subject. Firstly, we have Paul Roberts, who's Chief Executive of Abertawe Bro Morgannwg Health Board, based around Swansea, although today, using the magic of this technology, he's in North Wales. He will share his motivation for tweeting and discuss the opportunities it gives him to engage with leading thinkers, health board staff and members of the public. Secondly, is Helen Reynolds, who's the Digital and Social Media Manager at Monmouthshire County Council. She has won awards for best use of YouTube and social media innovation. Helen will explain why giving staff access to social media was not the end of the world and has enhanced the service offered by Monmouthshire to its residents. And thirdly, we have Tim Lloyd, who's Head of Digital Communications at the Department of Business, Innovation and Skills. He was a founder member of the Twitter conversation on the NHSSM hashtag, which is NHS social media for those who are unaware, when he worked in the Department of Health. And Tim will explain how social media offers organisations more opportunities to engage. The format for today's seminar is that each of our three contributors will make a brief presentation, and we will then have time for questions and answers. We will be looking forward to receiving comments from all of you, comments and questions throughout the seminar, so please use the chat panel, which you'll see on WebEx, to send us any comments and questions. We won't be able to take everybody's comments and questions, assuming that we have a lot of interest, but what I will do with Andrew Cooper, who's sitting alongside me, is try and group them together and bring out the most popular issues to put to our contributors. Other ways to join the conversation, you can share your comments on any social media, but if you follow the 1,000 Lives hashtag on Twitter, you may find comments there, and I know there are some already. So, before we start, I just thought some definitions might be helpful. This is for senior leaders. We are clearly all leaders, whatever we do, but the seminar is aimed at for senior officers, executive directors, senior managers, all those with a responsibility for taking forward their organisations or services. This is about engagement, and we're not simply talking about communication. Engagement is a deeper process which, in simple terms, can be just described as taking part in. And finally, our focus is online. Online engagement tools include social media, blogging, and indeed any technology like we're using here today. But engagement clearly has many tools which can help with it. So before we start, I'd just like to have a quick poll. And we've got a question for you to get you all into the technology. So can each of you please answer the question, are you already using social media actively to engage staff, stakeholders and the public in your work? And you'll see the question there, and if you could each answer now, and it'll take a while for the answers to come through, but rather than allowing a pregnant pause, we'll come to the answer in a minute. I use that time if I may, just before we get into the presentations, just to throw in a few thoughts of my own. Social media is here to stay. It needs to be understood in the same way that leaders have needed to understand the importance of team meetings within their organisations and mainstream media in the past. Social media platforms provide the power to break free from your geography and from the hierarchies within which we all work. However, social media is not a panacea. It is only a communications and engagement tool. Like any tool, it can be used poorly as well as successfully. What you say and how you listen are just as important, if not more important, than what appears on your websites, in the media, and in meetings in person. Fourthly, I'm just interested on where are the people we want to engage. If they're on Facebook, why do we use Twitter? Fifthly, listening takes time. How do leaders make time to listen to social media as well as the many other channels which people use to communicate? Next point, we must not forget the hard to reach. Not just those without a smartphone or computer, but the blind, the deaf, and those who speak minority languages. Social media isn't just for middle-class people who have access to a smartphone. And finally, this seminar is based in Wales. In Wales, we need to address the challenge of a bilingual nation and our ability to engage people proactively in Welsh to promote the language, which is, of course, our duty. So those are just all thoughts which may come out of presentations. Before we go to the first presentation, we've got an answer to the poll. The technology is in. We don't have Peter Snow, but I can tell you that 46% of you are already using social media in this way, 32% aren't, and 22% haven't answered. So that's perhaps you found the technology difficult, I don't know, but that gives you a quick snapshot. Roughly, about half the people on board at the moment are already using social media. So, I've already introduced Paul Roberts. Paul, would you like to kick off with your presentation?
Yes, indeed. Thanks, Chris. As Chris says, I'm Paul Roberts from ABMU Health Board, and I'm delighted to be joining this WebEx. I have to say I'm new to this, so this is the first time doing this particular format. So part of the message here is learning new techniques and tools for communicating. Just to introduce and say a little bit more about myself, I've worked in the NHS for 26 years now, and I've been a chief executive in the NHS for 18 years. And to put that into context, when I first became a chief executive, Mark Zuckerberg, the founder of Facebook, was 10, and it was 10 years before he set up Facebook. So I've been a chief exec long before social media in its current form existed. But I suppose one of the things for me is I've always believed in visibility and being open, and that communication is absolutely key in the NHS. So I hopefully have always been open-minded about using new techniques and tools for communicating. I'm going to whip through my slides, but I'm happy to pick up any of the issues that I raise in questions or discussion at the end. So I'm going to cover the points that are listed there on that slide over the next few minutes. Well, how did I get into Twitter is the question. Well, the answer is that in 2009, 4 years ago, a politician, the local MP in the place I was working, introduced me to it, and she persuaded me that it was time that I caught up with the 21st century, because of course politicians had been tweeting for some time and were one of the first group to adopt it. Mainly back then I was using Twitter just privately and personally because I was interested in what it had to offer. But for me, I started focusing on it as a professional tool a little bit later. Back in 2011, I was working here. This is Plymouth in Devon in England, and you'll see A on there is Derriford Hospital. I was the Chief Exec of Plymouth Hospital's NHS Trust based in Derriford, which was a single site largely organisation with about 6,000 staff, and perfectly possible to be pretty visible, to be seen around, to get around the organisation, to be reasonably familiar to people working in the organisation. But in 2011 I moved to this, and that is a map of Abertawe Bro-Morgannwg Health Board, and you can see the contrast here, all of a large patch, all of those different sites. So the challenge I was faced with in moving up to Wales, to Abertawe Bro-Morgannwg, was really one of complexity and scale. 16,000 staff, over 50 sites, responsibility which is you have slightly more in a health board context than you do in simply running a local hospital of all of your population. So well over 500,000 members of the public using our services. But also, very frankly, moving into a smaller NHS in the Principality of Wales, making sure that I was able to keep in touch and professionally up to date in what was a smaller NHS as well. So those were the challenges I faced. So as part of my response to that, I decided that I would use Twitter more as a work tool. And there we go. There is a copy of my Twitter account from a few days ago. And as you can see from that, I've been using it for some time. You can see some of the photos and a few of the messages that I've got on there. And I've made over 7,000 tweets since I started using the Twitter from ABMU Health Board, and over 1,700 followers as well. So again, using it a fair amount as a communication tool, and with quite a few people to interact with on Twitter. So why do I tweet? Well, Chris has touched on some of these things already, but for me, one of the main things was back to that challenge I talked about in ABMU about the organisation, and that is to use as many of the different methods to communicate as possible. So I do, like Chris was saying, only regard social media, and in this case Twitter, as one of a number of tools. So I blog regularly. I had a quick look at my stats the other day. I've had up to about 10,000 people looking at the blog. The one I did last week had 7,500 people. So it's read by quite a lot of people in the organisation. We have formal team briefing. We do lots of open meetings and lots of public forums as well. Really important for me, and I think professionally important, is to keep up to date. The growing number of chief execs use Twitter, some more enthusiastic than others. But I use Twitter to engage in debate and discussion and sharing of ideas on a whole set of issues with lots of people with an interest in healthcare. I'm also very keen that we open up debates on healthcare. The NHS is in a position where it's in the media all the time at the moment, not always for the right reasons. And my own belief is that we've got to keep the debate going about current issues in the NHS, increase the numbers of people who understand the issues, and I think Twitter offers one route for doing that. The other thing is to demonstrate I'm a human being and not just a faceless bureaucrat. I think Twitter offers lots of opportunities to do that. There are, of course, risks with using Twitter. Firstly, I think it can be possible to be too accessible. One experience I had was of a celebrity who was against something, opposed to something we were doing on the health board, was followed by tens of thousands of people, you know, taking me on personally and tweeting pretty hostile messages to thousands and thousands of people. Sometimes that feels like quite an exposed place to be. The other thing is you always have to remember that tweets are a public message. They are in some respects like putting out a press release. And using only 140 characters, you can, because you use shortened versions of words or shortened versions of sentences, be misunderstood. it is always possible to tweet very quickly on a subject and then by the time it's been read by a lot of people to regret it. So you have to be quite thoughtful about the way you use it. And whilst I would advocate using humour, you've got to remember the context in which some people are reading your tweets as well. Another point I would make is that people can be pretty obsessed by Twitter. I mean, it's a fascinating world to live in, but you've always got to keep yourself grounded. Twitter is a real world, it's an important world, it's an important place of communication, but it is not the real world, and you cannot forget your responsibility to use other media as well when you're trying to communicate. So just to finish off a few tips. And these are just personal ones. I'm not an expert in the field. This is just from my own experience. The first thing is tweet personally. People recognise a corporate tweet, and corporate tweets have their place. But do it personally, and don't just put endless statements out about how good your organisation is. Be engaging, discuss issues, post some of the negative stories about your organisation as well as the positive ones. You've got to engage honestly on Twitter. Don't be afraid to use humour. If you're trying to demonstrate that leaders are human beings, I tweet about sports, I tweet about running, and I tweet about music as well. Well, hopefully that's an obvious one. Don't tweet when emotional or intoxicated. If you're angry, you can easily tweet something that you regret. Give your views, but be careful not to get angry when people disagree with you. I think that is something you do occasionally see. You see Twitter conversations really go off with people being quite abusive. You've just got to keep calm and accept that on Twitter people have different views, as they do in any real life, and you've got to keep calm and cool about your responses. But always remember, I'm followed on Twitter by a whole range of journalists, including, I noticed the other day, somebody from the Today programme started following me. You've got to remember that anything you tweet could end up in the national news. It isn't just about how many people are following you. The most important thing is to find interesting people who've got interesting information, including patients and patient groups and members of the public who have something to say. They might not be followed by many people, but they'll keep you grounded in terms of what you're looking at. And my final one is be interesting, be engaging, try and make what you say interesting, but always it's important, be polite. So there we go, there are a few thoughts from me.
Thank you very much, Paul. That was very good, very helpful. In the spirit of keeping polite, I noticed that you nearly said, don't be a corporate twit, but you managed to correct yourself by saying corporate tweets aren't a good thing. Yeah, I think that's one of the things certainly I gain. I feel I know you very well following you on Twitter, because it is a social medium, and I find out about you as a person, which makes it much easier for me to understand some of the serious issues you raise. Just before we move on to Helen, I just wonder, is there an example, can you give us an example of where someone has tweeted you or responded to you, which has been a real point of learning for you, where you've then gone away and you've done something different in your role as chief executive as a result?
Yeah, I mean, there are numerous, and I guess there are two types, and I can think specifically of a couple of examples. The two types for me tend to be members of the public, and I was tweeted by a member of the public about a particular change we were making in part of our health service, reflecting on a particular issue, and in this case it was access by someone that used public transport but didn't use cars, and you know, had I thought and considered all the implications of the change that we were making, and part of the response to that was to go back and make sure that issue had been considered as part of our transport strategy group. So you know, there's a direct example. Another example is a member of staff that tweeted me about, again, a particular change that was going on in their part of the organisation, and it made me go and take a much closer look at it myself and actually have a real world conversation as well as an online one. So no, I can have a big impact.
That's great, thank you. And I think those are two real examples of actual engagement in action. So thank you for that. There will be, I see some questions are coming in, so please use the chat box, everybody, or tweet if you have any questions or points you'd like to make at the end. We'll move on now to Helen Reynolds, if we can, Digital and Social Media Manager at Monmouthshire County Council, and another person well worth following on Twitter for those of you who are looking for some learning. Helen, over to you.
Thank you very much. Great to follow on from Paul, because I think he's got some similar kind of attitudes to the way that we work in Monmouthshire. So hello, I'm Helen Reynolds. I work for Monmouthshire Council. And what we do in Monmouthshire with social media is really about using it as a tool, a business tool. So we understood that, you know, it's another channel for communication, and that's great for marketing and PR. We understood this quite early. But we also thought, well, actually, that there's much more potential for this. It's not just people talking about their breakfast, which is often what people will tell me, oh no, I'm not going on Twitter, it's just a lot of breakfast shops and pictures of dinner. Actually, it's quite serious, and it's a seriously effective tool for us. And it's not just for PR to control as well. So we see it much like phones and emails, pretty much a tool for us to use. And I'm going to talk a little bit today about the fact that we're not trying to tick boxes, so we don't really want a Facebook page for the sake of having it, or a Twitter channel just for the sake of it. We're actually looking at social media for making connections, for networking, learning, and a big thing for us is around showing personality. I think Paul referred to this as well, but showing our personality and also showing off our expertise and being able to share that. So January 2011, that was a date that I'll always say that's the time the world didn't end. So basically, we allowed all of our staff anytime access to social media. This came about after a bit of campaigning with our IT department a year before, but actually it was only when our leadership team got involved in this and understood the very powerful benefits of social media that they got behind this, and we said we'll actually give all of our staff anytime access. That means that if they want to check their Facebook account at any time of the day, that's fine as long as they get their job done. So what we did with social media is we kind of understood as well that a lot of our staff didn't know as much as residents, because they weren't able to access a lot of the blogs and information and things that people were talking about out there. We kind of learned in the first period of opening this access that the leaders in their field aren't always management. So we kind of got these great stars within our organisation who are leading their industry, who are really expert and talking and connecting. Their attitudes were fantastic, and they weren't necessarily always in a senior position, but we understood the benefit to the business. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Paul Matthews, who is our Chief Exec in Monmouthshire. He's probably not listening, so I'm glad, because it'd be a bit embarrassing, because I'm going to say nice things about the way he works. His bio on Twitter, he's Paul Matthews 67, if anyone wants to follow him. His bio on Twitter is CEO of Monmouthshire Council, trying to do things a little differently. Manager of Llaneravan under 14 football, 1 gorgeous wife, 2 tearaway sons. The reason I think this is a great bio is it shows lots of different sides to him. It shows actually that he's approachable. He's got a family. I can actually connect to him in various ways that aren't just with work. So from a staff point of view, we're getting this leadership from Paul that's around work issues, because he talks about those things as well, but he also talks about his life, and we can relate to him better. But more importantly, in a way, our residents can too, and our partners, and whoever it is that he wants to talk to there. So this kind of talking about your personal life as well as your professional life, let's describe it as life leak. Actually, far from being unprofessional, that life leak helps him to connect with people. He uses Twitter to find things out and to get information, and to tweet support and praise and interesting stories. He's talking to residents, businesses, he's talking to other people in local government, he's talking about football, he's talking to experts who live in America who don't even have anything to do with government, and he's talking to staff. he's relevant and he's in touch with what people are saying, and that's a really interesting and useful thing to have as a leader. And I think it makes people feel more confident around his leadership. They feel like they get him slightly. One thing that I think is really important around using social media is that this idea that we used to kind of go and talk to our friends and neighbours and colleagues about what the best information was. We might go to a conference. Well, actually, why limit ourselves to that information? We can get anywhere in the world. We can talk to almost anybody using these tools. So there's some cost saving here in terms of how do we get the best information, but also it's not costing us anything to have these conversations. So that's a really important thing for us. We're very keen on making sure that the leaders, and particularly the leaders in our organisation, but of course anyone, can contact really good people and make those relationships. There's a whole world out there that we can access. Moving swiftly on, so I think I'm coming to the end. Do you identify synergies to create a strategy for benchmarking success with partners? Because if you do, I have no idea what you do. Social media is this fantastic way of being very short and to the point, and if anybody uses this kind of jargon and codswallop, it just doesn't really fly on social media. People will say, I don't know what you're talking about. It's almost like a barrier to being understood. So I think in terms of our leadership and social media in Monmouthshire, it's been brilliant for making us just kind of really get to the point and talk about what it is that we do, instead of this, what some people will understand as being professional is actually really very limiting in terms of how many people understand what you're saying. So we think that the tone has actually changed a little bit in Monmouthshire since we've had this access to social media, because we're beginning to talk like human beings again, and not so much of the corporate guff. Another great thing is that we do get that feedback from people as well. So if they don't understand, we've got that very quick opportunity to kind of rethink the way that we're saying it and get back. And that does allow for our vision to be much more shared. It's a shared vision that people understand because they've had an input in. So I'm going to leave it there, and if anyone's got any questions later, that would be fantastic. If you want to hear a bit more about what we do in Monmouthshire, or my experiences in work, you can read my blog, which I'm sure I can tweet later and share with you. But thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Helen. That was great, and some really important points there. You reinforced the points Paul was making earlier about the need for personality. And one issue which may come up in questions later is about the introducing the personal into people's working environment, which I know some people feel very uncomfortable with. I live in Monmouthshire, so I follow Paul Matthews, your Chief Exec, on Twitter, and I find out lots about the council through him. I'm less inclined to enjoy his tweets about Cardiff City Football Club, but no doubt when they're relegated I'll be enjoying that again. Just before we move on to Tim, just a question for you. You talk about, and I agree, the importance of social media encouraging people to use easy English again, because there just isn't the scope for that jargon. There are some leaders who lead in their professions and in their technical disciplines who aren't natural communicators in a lay sense, but are very good at their job and provide great leadership within their service. Are they, do you think, likely to be left behind by this, or are they any less good at leadership just because they struggle with using 140 characters to express themselves?
No, I mean, I think the most talented people will always find a way of using the tools in the best way, and it's a learning curve, but I'm pretty sure that people who are excellent at their job can pick this up in no time. If someone like me can do it, then I'm sure they can as well. It's just about getting a bit more concise, really.
Okay, thank you. Well, again, everybody, if you can please use the chat to register comments and questions, or to use Twitter. We've got a number coming in. We'll all have a chance in about 10 minutes' time to open it up for questions and comments. So please start putting your questions in now. The earlier you get them in, the easier it is for us to manage them and put them to all our contributors. So thirdly, our third contributor today is Tim Lloyd, who, as I introduced earlier, is Head of Digital Communications in the Department for Business, Innovation and Skills. And just to show what a lovely world I live in, I follow him on Twitter as well. But this isn't me and all my mates. I can promise you I've never actually met Tim, and I've never spoken to him up till half an hour ago. So, Tim, your chance.
Thanks very much, Chris, and thanks to everyone for listening in this afternoon. I think we've heard loads of really interesting stuff already about the way in which different organisations are bringing personality to their online presence. What I'd like to do in the next few minutes is share with you a bit of my experiences in terms of developing digital leadership, both here at BIS, but also in other around government and other departments, and hopefully give some of you the underpinnings for a really great business case for taking digital forward in a kind of sustainable way within your organisations. So why as leaders should you bother with digital? If I had to pick 3 points, they would be these ones. We as organisations, as representatives of organisations, need to know what our customer wants. And digital gives us this rock solid sort of feedback loop that enables us to understand what people are saying about us without saying it to us, and enables us to act upon that and to develop what we're offering and feedback. In certain areas we're doing this with policy teams. Most obviously we do it with the development of the gov.uk website, where we have a feedback loop which enables people to comment on what they do and don't like, and for us to develop the content and develop the user experience as best we can. We do it, as I say, through policy making, and when I was working at Department of Health, I was privileged to assist with the NHSSM community, and that was a sort of a really useful way of using digital for personal development between people working in various aspects of communications and using social media within the NHS. So that's point one. The other reason we need to do this is that I actually think the corporate web presence is dead. If not right now, then very shortly will be. I fundamentally think that people want to talk to people. They want to talk to Helen's CEO with the gorgeous wife and the 2 kids. They don't want to hear from logos and organisations, particularly I think at a regional level where we all know how we feel if you live on a county line or a district line. You may not have a sort of a particular allegiance to one organisation, and therefore you want to know who the people are who are responsible for the things that are happening in your area. And finally, and this is the one that I struggle to sort of overcome, but we all know there is a world of commentary and a world of really valuable insight and no less valuable commentary beyond the Today programme and newspapers. So our organisations need digital to listen to what our customers are saying, to acknowledge the fact that our customers want to hear from people, not corporations, and to engage with the wider media beyond the traditional channels. There's a lot of disruption out there as well, which I think supports those points I've made. I can talk you through a few examples of what's happening close to home for us at the moment, and no doubt there'll be similarities with the areas that you all work in. But for us, civil service reform calls for a much more digital civil service, individual civil servants who are empowered to use digital tools for policy making and to be personally responsible for their online presence. And this is a huge, huge change. It would be for any largish business or organisation, but it's a massive change for the government, for the civil service of all organisations. But this is a major positive but disrupting factor to the way that we view communications and the web. The second one I'm particularly excited about, and that's the fact that any one of you on the call right now can probably talk to some of my senior colleagues, those that have a social media profile, faster than I can. If you follow at Sir Bob Kerslake, they're very head of the civil service on Twitter, you can tweet him a question faster than I can arrange a meeting or email him or get through his office. And likewise, a couple of our junior ministers here at BIS, Joe Swinson and Matt Hancock, you will find on Twitter. And these people are real, genuine users of Twitter. It's their accounts, it's logged into their phone. They are representing themselves online. And that means that as an organisation, we have to up our game in order to keep up with the quick route to these people that our audiences enjoy. The other disrupting factor is that there are causes out there that can be mobilised at great speed. I think most people on the call may remember the speed with which 32 Degrees were able to mobilise people to campaign against health service reforms in England. But closer to home, I've been absolutely fascinated and no less impressed, in fact, by Greenbelt campaigners in my local area, who, I don't think between them there's a marketeer or a communications specialist or a campaign manager, but in a couple of weeks they've been able to find 4,000 people in and around local villages to join in a campaign on Facebook, Twitter and across email to lobby against development in local fields. And we're seeing examples of this all the time. Finally, the other element of disruption is that the web sometimes enables us to do things cheaper and easier than we might have done in the past. We're able to develop conversations quickly, and we're less reliant on those big set-piece engagement events. Once upon a time, if we wanted to consult on some policy here at BIS, we might have had to have a bunch of people, reasonably representative audience, into the office for tea and biscuits, and we'd have had to get all our knowledge and insight out of them there and then. Now we can talk to them online and develop that policy iteratively. We're not there yet, but that's our aim. So those are the sort of the four disrupting factors that are top of my mind at the moment, and I think should be the biggest driver for getting senior leaders online. So some examples to support that. We use the web primarily, or we encourage policy teams here at BIS to use the web first and foremost to listen to what their audiences are saying, and to try and better understand the sort of language that audiences are using when they're describing the policy areas that we're responsible for, from launching a small business to employment law to science and universities. The other example that I'm particularly keen on is that we use the web to put data behind the way that people are consuming our information and sharing it. So we've run a huge project recently to understand how people search the web for information about starting a business and where they go afterwards, who are the influencers online that they go to for advice and to discuss the highs and lows of running an SME. This is really tangible data that enables us to deliver what I hope is sort of a better campaign and help people run a business better than they might have been able to otherwise. We're really keen to get our policymakers, not just our ministers, out there talking about the things that they're really passionate about. So our ministers you will see on television, you'll see them online as well, as I've said, but there are people within this building who are really knowledgeable about their areas, and to that end we recently joined in one of the leading sort of agricultural online communities, the hashtag AgriChat, to promote but also to test the ideas in our agricultural technology strategy. And that's a really great opportunity for our policy team to engage directly with the people that their work affects and to hear directly back from them what they think of it, areas for improvement, where the gaps are. It's real sort of first-hand evidence. And finally, another example I'm quite fond of, but this is a little bit crude, so put down your lunch if you're still eating lunch. Sometimes this is about ceding control of channels as well. As I said, this is sort of one of the disrupting influences on what we do. But as an example, we have here in BIS, we use Yammer, have done for a number of years as a sort of an internal social network, so it's closed off. You can't join it if you're not an employee of BIS. But having said that, there's a couple of thousand of us here at the department, so it's a fairly big network. I have to say that the conversations there are often pretty uninspiring. There's lots of people talking, or rather there's not very many people talking, it's just a handful in fact. But the time that this channel has become its has been most impressive has been when people started moaning about the state of the toilets and the fact that they, without putting too fine a point on it, weren't flushing correctly. And this was the single best channel to get our estates team online and answering those questions and getting the problem solved. And I think that sometimes the point I'm making is that digital channels, we'd like them to be really influential with our fellow staff, with our audiences, in a way that enables us to promote and strategize, but actually sometimes digital is just brilliant for getting the toilets sorted out or something really practical. And finally, some tips from me. You need carrots and sticks for digital if we're to deliver it successfully and produce a case for getting our leaders online. Carrots being all the things that we've heard about this afternoon, which is that bringing that personality to life, engaging directly with audiences, but there's some sticks as well. For us at civil service reform, and for all of us, I think it's the fact that people out there expect to be able to talk to people online and to be able to have their say and to be mobilized behind causes at speed. It's very, very important to demonstrate how this stuff saves time and builds better relationships. Otherwise, digital is just something you're adding into other people's workload. It's crucial that digital is bigger than just Twitter and websites, and I think that Paul and Helen made that point very well earlier. I would seize upon the occasional crisis or controversy in your organizations as an opportunity. That's an absolutely brilliant opportunity, difficult as it may seem at the time, to demonstrate that people are talking about this stuff online and to engage with them, and in many cases done well, you can turn the tide of opinion. And finally, practice what you preach. If you want other senior leaders online, you need to be there as well, not just on Twitter, but picking channels that you're comfortable with, that are relevant to your audience. So those are my tips, and I look forward to answering some questions.
Thank you very much, Tim, and again, very interesting. I think if Sir Humphrey was logged on, he'd be choking on his cornflakes as he was still eating his breakfast. I thought the tip around using crisis or controversy as an opportunity was a very real one, certainly one I can reflect on, having used myself when faced with public health crisis. We're running short of time, so I'm going to go straight on to questions. Thank you, everyone who's putting questions in. I don't think we're going to have time for everything, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the questions and put them just to one each of you, so you'll each get a chance, Paul, Helen and Tim, to answer, but rather than getting three people answering each question, if that's okay. So the first question, I'd like this for Paul, if that's okay. It's from Paula Walters. Are people who regularly tweet in via work, in their work capacity, capable of switching off, or do they feel constantly accessible and sort of drowned by it all?
Thank you. I think, Paula, that is a danger because I alluded to it earlier. Twitter and Facebook, if you use that professionally too, and we do as well in our organisation, is quite addictive. And I don't know how many times I've been told off by my wife over breakfast for please talk to me and stop tweeting. On the other hand, one of the healthy things, particularly about Twitter, is the convention that people don't expect you to be responding and replying, or even looking at every tweet they put out on your timeline. The convention on Twitter is that you can drop in and out, and in order to manage your time and to tweet when you've got time to do it, or to decide that you're unavailable, it is perfectly okay to switch off and be unavailable. I think you have to get used to those conventions, but if you follow those conventions, I don't think it's a big imposition at all.
And from Aideen on that, Paul, I mean, you clearly do make time to tweet during the working day. That was time, presumably, 20 years ago you weren't tweeting in. How difficult has it been for you to make that time?
I tend to tweet in between things, or while I'm waiting for something, and I suppose I mean one of the conventions I have is about a third of my time should be spent on communicating within and outside the organisation. I think in the sort of job I do that's about the time I set myself for that, and that might be you know, in open meetings with staff, or it might be at public meetings in the evening on changes in the NHS. But I believe tweeting is a legitimate use of that time as well. So I don't feel guilty if I've got some time when I could be on my emails actually just doing some tweets, drawing people's attention to an article online or something like that. I think there's no guilt about that. I think it's a legitimate use of time. But I have to say I find more time to do it perhaps early in the mornings or in the evenings, and sometimes you'll find me absent from Twitter for hours of the day.
Thank you, Paul, and appreciate that. And I think it's a really important point to make that you know you just have to accept that you're not going to read everything which comes up, and you're not going to be able to respond to everybody individually, and that's actually one of the conventions which is the delight about it. Yeah. Tim's added in in the chat that blogging's an excellent is excellent if your time doesn't allow for Twitter. So this isn't all just about Twitter. Second question, or third question I'd like to take is the one from Andrew Byrne. This is specifically for you, Helen, and it's you know, how do you use Twitter internally to talk to staff? If you could broaden that out to, you know, as an engagement, using social media as an engagement tool for internal communications, which I think is still fairly new for a number of organisations. But if you could comment a bit about that, that would be helpful.
Okay, thanks. We don't formally use Twitter internally, or at least we don't tweet for staff specifically, but staff are interested in the same things that residents are half the time. Your person in environmental health, for instance, doesn't really know much about what's going on at Aberglenny Food Festival. So they, you know, we learn about each other and things that are going on through Twitter. But we've got the usual channels for talking internally. We've got a staff magazine, which is an e-zine. We use, I mean, something like Yammer. I do kind of believe that Yammer may be dead to some degree, but where we found it really useful is with people like foster carers who wanted to have a kind of a private group to discuss what they do, and they've found this little community where they can talk and they can do it from the app on their phone actually really breaks down the isolation between them, because they don't get to talk to each other or see each other during the year very much at all. So we try to use the tools where they're useful, and kind of solve a problem with a tool rather than just say, well, let's use Yammer because Yammer's something for staff. Rather, well, you know, foster carers have said they want somewhere to find information and that they don't talk to each other enough, so let's use this rather than building a complicated website. So we use as many different techniques to communicate with staff as we've got time to do, really, as we've got the resource to do.
Thank you. Thank you. Next question I'd like to pick is from Andy Scottson. And this one I'm going to put to you, Tim, if that's okay, because you talked about, in particular, using online as a way of listening. When we use the web to listen, do we get a slightly distorted worldview, and how do we balance online communications and messages with those from people who don't use social media?
Okay, yeah, no, that's a very, very valid question, particularly with some of the audiences I imagine we're all dealing with in the health arena, as well as here at the Department for Business as well. I should just be really clear that we're not advocating digital as sort of a replacement for face-to-face engagement or telephone lines and that sort of thing. We run a very successful helpline, telephone line for people wanting to start a business. We offer, the government offers all sorts of ways of people getting in touch other than digital, and obviously we run job centres and that kind of thing as well. But I think that then when we look at, even if we look at feedback online, we need to be making sure that we're using the channels and looking at the channels that are most appropriate to the audience that we're interested in, or the topic that we're interested in. And it's never that obvious. Twitter's dead easy, and it's the obvious thing to go after it, and it's very easy to sort of measure and interact with. But frequently we find that it's very it's poorly representative of the sorts of people we're trying to get in touch with. Actually, one of my most sort of common scenarios is talking to leaders around the department and explaining that a slightly dull-looking forum or some sort of expert blog posts that are out there online are probably the most representative of the audiences that we're looking to target. And that's not always a difficult, not always an easy conversation to have when people are so excited about the sort of the sexier, shinier end of social media. But I think to answer that question clearly, this is not just about replacing offline engagement, far from it. And it's also about being very selective about the online channels that we use.
Thank you very much, Tim. That's good. We'll just move straight on to the next question, which was put by Kevin Hogan. And this one, Paul, can I start with you? How are we going to balance safeguarding issues for staff and the public with use of social media in the workplace? I just wonder if there's any examples you've dealt with there. I mean, you clearly have a leadership role in safeguarding.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the question's getting at, Chris, to be absolutely honest. I mean, clearly social media has to be used in exactly the same way as other communication tools. In other words, there are rules about confidentiality and the ways that social media are used, just as there are about every other form of written and spoken communication as well. So the same professional practice rules apply. My own view is that largely we should be trusting people's professional judgment and opening up social media much more widely in the NHS. It's still relatively limited, the degree to which people can adopt it. But as Tim has made clear, and this is something that's on a roll and we can't stop. And people are now bringing in their own devices into work and using social media anyway. So I personally think we should be more relaxed about making the medium more available, but just as clear about people's professional responsibilities when they're using it.
Thank you, and I agree absolutely with that. I think there's an issue whenever any new media or any new technology enters. People sort of think the rest of the world doesn't apply, but actually all the rules around safeguarding apply as much to social media as any other communications media, any other communications tool, and I think that's important for us all to recognise in a leadership role. It may be, of course, something which the public can open up in a way that perhaps they didn't in the past. Next question, can this one be for Tim? What are your views, Tim, on the risks from those who may have an axe to grind if one is tweeting in a personal capacity?
Good question. I've fallen foul of this before. I think that it's inevitable that it happens to anyone who has an online profile that that they use for discussing things they're involved in at work as well as for personal stuff. I think that each individual just has to have a very clear idea about how they will handle those encounters when they happen. And as the more you use some of these channels, the more attuned you will get to whether this particular axe grinder is a serious one or one that can be sort of placated in some way. So there's a particular journalist who occasionally gives me a hard time on Twitter. He's a journalist who is important to us as a department, because he writes about things that we're interested in, and occasionally, if it's a sort of a reasonably lightweight comment about the way that we've presented something or delivered something online, then I'm kind of comfortable responding, and I think he recognises that. And a couple of times I've held my hands up to mistakes and things, but it's always me in a personal capacity, something that I've pushed the wrong button somewhere or said the wrong thing. But there's also occasions when I don't get back to him at all, because it's a pretty hefty complaint about something to do with a piece of policy that I don't begin to understand. In which case I send that on to someone with more knowledge than I to get back to him, often offline or via email. And to be honest, that seems to work. I think that's a fairly useful example, because this person is in no way a troll, but nor are they sort of an advocate of me or the department. That's I think treat with caution and take a deep breath before you respond, and decide where the line is between what you're going to respond to and what you're going to send elsewhere for support.
Thank you very much. I think it's 4:58, so I think it's probably time to round up now. I'd like to firstly thank you, Paul, Helen and Tim, for your contributions today and the presentations, and for your very expert views that you've given us. What struck me most about the last hour is the importance of the word social in social media, and the need for personality and to show something of yourself, not to hide behind the corporate. The fact that this is a new channel, but it doesn't mean that all other channels are redundant. And that we've had some very real examples today about how online, how engagement can be conducted online. The one question I wanted to ask, which we didn't get time to answer, but in a way I hope the whole seminar has addressed, was from Kate Hammond on Twitter, who says, how do we turn on our senior leaders to their own power within social media and not just leave it as a job for the comms team? Well, right now there are 95 people still on board. There have been more than 100 people throughout. So it would be really helpful if you could feedback on chat in terms of how valuable this has been to you, and whether, as a result of the last hour, you are more or less convinced about the need for engaging people online. So today's session, it's been recorded and it will be uploaded on the 1000 Lives Plus website in the next few days. Just one more question for you before we finish. When you close your WebEx screen, a pop-up window with a session's evaluation will appear. I'll be really grateful if you could complete this form so that we can learn and make improvements in future sessions. I know that each one of these run by 1000 Lives is learning from the ones in the past. I've really enjoyed today. I've learned a lot, as I always do whenever I'm thinking or talking about these issues. So I'd like to thank all of you, the more than 100 people, particularly the big group from Scotland, so that's good to hear. Those from the US, those from Canada, and indeed those who are downstairs in the building I'm sitting in. So thank you very much all, and goodbye.